Good evening. This is the December 19, 2018 Board of Appeals hearing. We have minutes from last month. Did everyone get a chance to see those and any corrections, concerns with approving the minutes from last month? And if not, if someone could make a motion.
I so move to adopt them.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. All right, so this evening there's 4 petitions before us, and at the moment, is it 6:30? At the moment, there's 4 members up here. I say that because the board has 5 members, and for a petitioner to receive what they're looking for this evening, an approval, they do need to, it is required that they receive 4 votes. So when we're down an individual as we are, we have to give the option to the petitioner if they want to postpone until the next month. Now, I do expect the gentleman to show up. I spoke with him 2 days ago, and I was under the impression he's going to be here, but I thought we could get the meeting started. However, if any of the 4 petitioners don't want to proceed because it's only 4 members at the moment, that's fine. And, you know, we can wait and see if this gentleman shows up. If there's anyone that wants to proceed with just the 4 members, understanding that they need a full vote, we can start the meeting and do that. I was planning on the following lineup, but that's all altered now because of what I just said. I was going to proceed with Marvin Street first, followed by Linden, and then I was going to have the Lebanon with its 2 petitions at the end. So I guess the question at this point is, would any of the 4 petitioners want to proceed right now with 4 members?
Good evening, excuse me. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Patrick McDonald with offices at 477 Eastern Ave. I'm here tonight representing, I guess, 3 of the 4 matters before the board. The 2 that apply to the 457 Lebanon Street property as well as the Marvin Street property. I'm just learning, of course, that we have a short board, and if I could ask the indulgence of the board, I feel the need to at least discuss that issue with both petitioners in those matters and see where they stand on it.
Right, and he may come through the door any moment.
I understand.
Why don't I call him? See if maybe he's in traffic, maybe he's looking for a parking spot. I talked to him 2 days ago, and he didn't indicate he was, and I haven't heard from him subsequent to that he was not coming. So I expect him to be here any moment. But if he wasn't coming, were you going to proceed?
Well, that's what I need.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. You're going to talk with your clients.
Conversation
sure.
with both parties.
So you could probably do that now while
Yes.
I'm trying to do this, and they're doing nothing.
Thank you very much.
Who am I looking for here? Dino. Mr. Summers. Okay. So that call went to voicemail. Again, I don't know what to tell you folks. We can sit and wait if anyone wants to proceed, but it's totally your decision. Understand that you would need all 4 votes to have your variance approved. Okay. So I guess we'll sit and wait. Hi.
If I may,
Sure.
I'm not volunteering to go before the slaughter. It's just a question of, if there's any doubt anyway, somebody might vote no. And I suppose a question I might propose is, if I were to proceed and not get 4 votes, when could I come back?
I believe it'll be 2 years.
Oh, God.
Yeah, are you with Linden?
I'm sorry?
Which property, Linden?
Oh, 84 Linden, yes. I'm getting kind of long in the tooth, and I don't know how much time I have to straighten out the property before I turn it over to my children.
He's not coming.
He's not coming. Well, why don't I proceed, Mr. Commissioner?
Okay. Just give me a moment. All right, so we're doing the Linden Ave property, and are you Mr. Snow?
I'm Mr. Snow, yes.
Okay, let me just read our ad, and we'll proceed. So this is the petition of Raymond and Mary Snow for a variance of section 800.4.1.3, chapter 12 of the revised ordinances of 1991, as amended, of the City of Malden administration, to hear and decide appeals of decisions or orders made by the inspector of buildings or other administrative official, as per plans at the property known as 84 Linden Ave, also known by the city assessor parcel map 50, block 282, parcel 211. And you are Mr. Snow, the owner of the property, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you don't need an address, right? He's just the owner of the property. Not just, he is. And Mr. Snow, the 4 members you see all visited your property today, I will tell you. So why don't you just give us a brief summary of what it is, what brings you here tonight and what you are trying to achieve?
Yes, I took the liberty, at the time I prepared the petition for this appeal, to put together my thoughts on the problem that was created and that I find myself trying to remedy. I bought the property over 36 years ago. And when I bought the property, it was represented to be an 8-unit apartment building. In my attempt at some due diligence, I checked out various things, and I found out the property was in fact being taxed by the assessing department as an 8-unit, and the taxed accordingly on that value. And then I found out that there had been a petition filed by Mr. Constantino Tamboris, who bought the property during the 70s sometime. And I guess pursuant to some code enforcement activity, Mr. Tamboris found out that the property was only authorized as a 5-unit and not an 8-unit. So he hired a local Malden attorney to represent him, who had some familiarity with these type cases. He paid him $3,500. They put the petition through. The board did visit the property, and around January 28th, if I recall correctly, in 1980, an order was issued approving the change from 5 units to 7 units, and disregarded the 8th basement unit. However, there were some conditions attached to that approval, and those conditions were that they put in some kind of a stairway from the third floor for egress from the property and put in some hot top and what have you. Well, something happened along the line. That was in the wintertime. They couldn't put in the hot tops. They couldn't do the improvements required, and it didn't get done for about a year. And finally, all those things were done. Mr. Comboris changed horses in the middle of the stream. Apparently, he fired his Malden attorney for whatever reason, and he hired an attorney, Mr. Miliotis, from Somerville, who specialized in criminal cases and small divorces and what have you, a person who is not familiar with whatever rules go along with these type cases. Well, after I did my due diligence, found out that this board had approved 7 units. I was quite happy in my ignorance of what all the rules were and said, okay, so we got an 8th unit down there. I'll take the property anyway as 7, so I went through with it. And I read a copy of the report issued by the board, and I read letters that Mr. Miliotis, the second attorney, had sent in to the city requesting confirmation that all of the defects had been corrected that were required by the board way back in January of '80. And I saw the copies of the letter say, well, everything is all fixed. It looks like they got 7 units. So I was happy, ignorantly happy. Until recently, getting a little bit long in the tooth, can hardly see out of one eye. I got no lungs left, COPD. The knees are creaking, my neck is creaking, and all that kind of stuff. I figured I got to get my estate straightened out for my kids. So the one problem lingering in my mind was, what will I do with that 8th unit at Linden Ave? So if you had taken the time to read the little brief that I submitted, you'll perhaps recall that a neighbor of mine was the commissioner of building codes and all that stuff in the city of Somerville. And he's a friend of mine. I asked him if he would go over the property, look it over, and see what it needed to make it in compliance with all the building codes. And I was very happy when he came back and reported to me several days later that there was nothing wrong with the property. It's got the access, the egress, it's got everything it needs. So I said, I've been sitting on this thing for 25 years, doing absolutely nothing, not collecting anything from it, paying all the bills to keep the property going, and all the while, the property was in good shape. And as I look back at the Board of Appeals report issued in January of 1980, there was an interesting comment that none of the inspectors had viewed that basement apartment. So my God, why didn't they approve it? Why didn't they inspect it? Why didn't they give them the 8 units? Anyway, the fatal flaw was that Miliotis, being a divorce attorney, criminal attorney, not knowing the rules here, failed to record something, whatever it must be, that had to be recorded. It wasn't recorded ever. So in my quest to straighten out the problem with the 8th unit, we met with officials of the department, and they said you had to record something within 1 year of the completion of that order. Well, Miliotis didn't know it. I didn't know it. So now I find myself fighting not just for the 8th unit to straighten out my estate and this problem, but fighting for the other 2 units as well. Well, I am hoping that the documents I submitted were all truthful, authoritative, and they were based upon the records that I've kept. I'm a retired CPA, and presently I'm still working as a tax attorney. I've got a clientele in my Somerville office, and I've got a responsibility to keep all good records for all of these cases, including my own. So I took the liberty of providing to some of you some documents showing financial information to show that we're not making a hell of a lot of anything on that property. But hopefully appreciation has taken place, and there's a gain there somewhere. But that 8th unit is still a bug in my neck, and I want to get the thing straightened out. So here I stand before you, hoping that those documents that I have submitted have shown a reasonable hardship to this case, and that we have always provided affordable rent for a wide diversity of different type tenants. We submitted to you a copy of our rent roll for several years, and by reading the rent roll, you can see that our tenants comprise a wide diversity of ethnicity, from all over. And I can't recall in 36 years ever evicting any tenant. And certainly many tenants have been behind in their rent. But I've been kind enough not to just kick them out, work something out, or let them go. You can't, if he can't pay the rent, you're not going to chase him, and you're not going to get anything out of him. I mean, that's just standard. So we've tried to be good owners. We've splattered the property with mums and bushes, so all the neighbors walk by and smell them, and they say, "Isn't this beautiful? We've never had this before." That's just some of the things that we do. So from an economic standpoint, if we went back to 5 units, when you look at the cost of operating the property based upon the information which were provided to you for your review, we're dividing the $80,000 and $90,000 cost of operating the property between 8 units, which cuts the average rent down to like $1,000 a month. And if we only had 5 units in there, the average cost for the 5 units to cover the cost of operating would be around $1,600 a month. I think economically, it provides a good reason for keeping rents low and for having 8 units instead of 5 or even 7. So basically, I'm hoping that this honorable board will consider that there is a hardship by depriving us of the 3 units. We got 5, the 3 units up to 8. And we're hoping that we've shown that the granting of the occupancy permits for 8 units will not denigrate from the rules and be in any way injurious to the local community. And I suppose lastly, that this honorable board approve our request for the 8 units, because it will not derogate in any way from the integrity of the program that you have here in the city. So with that, I don't know whether I can count on 4 votes, but I might not even be here next year, so I'd appreciate your consideration. We had 7, and I was only looking for 1.
Okay.
And now I come back fighting for 3, and this is completely new to me. So I thank you for your time, and well, one more thing, if I may. In the event that any one of the board finds a weakness in this request and can make a suggestion of how we can correct it, like Comboris did way back in 1980. You told them, we want you to fix this, we want you to fix that, and they did it. So rather, folks, rather than kicking me out, I may not be here next year. If you got something you'd like me to do to make this thing work, please tell me, so we don't have to wait.
Okay, thank you.
Any questions?
Yeah. I did read, you put together quite a extensive package of information about rents and socioeconomical, and but I also reviewed all the, internal record keeping within the city, and I have a chronology that I saw, and that is, and I believe our building inspector probably did as well. I saw that in 1939, there was a request of this board to change the property from a 5 to a 6 unit, and it was denied.
Is that 1939?
39.
39.
Then, in 1979, there was inter-office memo between building inspector and assessor, with the building inspector saying it's a 5-unit property. Then in that was 1979, it's in your folder. And then in 1980, Mr. Koukouris came before the board and apparently did receive the approval for 7 units with a number of conditions, but the fatal flaw, as you mentioned in your package, is that he didn't file it at the Registry of Deeds. So then you purchased it in 1982, correct?
Yes, I acquired the middle.
According to my records, you
Middle of
purchased.
82.
Right. So you purchased it after Koukouris.
Yes, it is.
Right. So that's the chronology that I see, and with reference to all the corrections that were done and the Mr. Miliotis, what I saw, that was all about code violations.
There were 2.
There were more than 2. There were 33 at one point. But that
33.
communication was between code enforcement and building inspector and property owner. The only point I'm trying to make, it didn't relate to establishing the property with the legality of the units, which is the issue before us tonight. That's all I'm saying.
Now, the first list was 33.
Right, right. But again, that was not about establishing the amount of units that were legal. It was that there was citations because of code violations.
But it was in the appeal report. The appeal said, we want you to do these.
The appeal
5
had 5 conditions: hot top, fire control panel, established egress
Yes,
for the 3rd floor unit, and we question whether there isn't one today.
paving.
And there was one other thing, wasn't there 4 or 5 conditions when Mr. Koukouris got, but he didn't file it at the registry.
He didn't.
Oh.
Well, he sent a second letter in, which related to the completion of those 5 things required by
Right,
the appeals.
but that's the code violation issues. That's not about the legality of the units, which is what's in front of us tonight.
Well, wouldn't you say that the decision reached and printed in the January 28th letter to Mr. Koukouris said we approve 7 units. However, there are 5 things that you've got to complete. It seemed to me that made the approval conditional. I don't think he could have filed any recorded thing anywhere that would relieve him from the responsibility of providing the access to that 3rd floor and the panel and the paving. Nothing would excuse him from that. So I would look at that as a layman and say the approval for the 7 units was conditional upon him doing that work. I mean, why would you put it in there otherwise? And that's what I say today.
But we're back to the fact that he didn't file it at the Registry of Deeds.
I'm sorry?
We're back to the fact that he didn't file a decision at the Registry of Deeds.
He changed horses in the middle of the stream.
Yeah.
He went from a competent Malden attorney to whom he paid $3,500 for his services, and he fired him and went to Miliotis you know, by that time span between January 28th of 80 and April or June of 81, like a year and almost a half.
Right.
So he changed horses, and Millie Otis, he's a divorce attorney. I know him for many years. He's a divorce attorney and handled some criminal cases, but he knows nothing about this kind of law,
Right.
like the Malden attorney did. So
Let me
he changed-
see if any of the other members have any thoughts or questions.
I'm reading the 1980 decision. I think the number third condition was that the basement apartment had to be removed. That's the 8th unit that you're seeking. Is that correct?
Well, listen, I'm getting a little hard of hearing, too.
Sorry. It seems to me, I'm reading here that one of the conditions for this was that the basement apartment had to be removed. This is the 1980 decision?
Yes, that's correct, and it
But-
was.
It was removed, because I believe aren't you seeking 8 units? Doesn't that include a basement unit now?
When that decision came through, they had to get rid of, for 25 years, they stored garden tools and seeds and rakes and stuff in that apartment, until I called Mike Foley from the Somerville inspection guy and had him check it out. They said there's nothing wrong with that apartment. So I never rented it from the time I took over the property because it was illegal. I never rented it for like 25 years until about year 2005. That's when I had Mr. Foley check it out. And it being legal, I intended to come in and do it, but I didn't want to upset any apple cart. So that's what I did. So it was vacant all those years. Does that answer the question?
I just almost kind of feel like the argument's kind of circular, because you're asking us to approve this on the basis of you're asking us to approve 8 units now, largely based on a variance from 1980 that said that 8th unit couldn't go in the apartment. So I just feel like there's kind of a conundrum there.
Well, I'm not completely familiar with your procedures, but I know that if in 1980 the board refused to grant him permission to occupy that apartment, that's game over. So in all these years, the apartment has been an illegal apartment. And I do admit before you today that around year 205, 206, I was looking for some kind of a janitor to shovel the snow and what have you. So I hired this guy Carter, and I guess you read the story. So it was illegal to do that, but I needed the money to pay the taxes. So it's not circular at all. I don't think we don't have permission now for that 8th unit. We don't even have permission for the 6th and 7th. So I'm trying to put it all together and get your approval.
So there was an individual who expressed interest, I think, in purchasing the property, and I think that's what triggered all of this. And our building commissioner was asked to make a legal determination, and this is dated, 6 weeks ago. His position is that it's a 5-unit structure, 5-unit property.
That's correct, right?
Yeah. And that's what you're appealing tonight, and that's what's before the board.
Well, that brought it to a head.
Right.
That brought it to a head, but the people have backed out because they can't buy a 5-unit building. And I think that the building can be a profitable building. You get the mortgage paid off. All we have to do is come up with the money for repairs, and it'd be a nice asset to leave for my children. I have 4 children, 3 of whom are in the business, and 1 of them drives me around because I can't see anymore. So, yeah, yes, there was interest, and that's what brought this to a head. I got to get these problems straightened out. And I was surprised I got 2 more units to fight about instead of just 1. So I would appreciate anything you could do. And if you give me 4 votes, I'd appreciate it.
All right.
If
Any
you
other
give me 3
questions
votes,
from the board? Kathleen, you all right? Bill? Okay. So what I think we'll do is open it up, see if there's any public participation. That'll be our next step. If you want to just relax there and take a seat, and we're gonna open up if there's any public participation. Anyone that wants to comment on this particular variance request?
Thank you,
Okay.
ladies and gentlemen.
Hearing none, would any member like to hear from our building commissioner?
I would, yes.
Yeah, okay. Mr. Miller, would it be possible to give us your cliff notes on this?
This doesn't happen very often, but I think that everything Mr. Snow said is 100% accurate. There was 2 denials previously from the Board of Appeals, and then there was one that was granted. It was for 7 units. It was to remove the basement. There was a laundry list of violations that went along with it. As has already been said, that variance wasn't carried through with legally. So in a legal use determination of the property, it ends up coming, it lands at a 5-unit dwelling.
Nelson, why is that? What's the reason, I guess, why are the 2 other units not considered legal units?
Because there's only one way to change the use or occupancy of any structure from what it's originally constructed as, and that is to receive a building permit and then an occupancy. So in absence of ever receiving a building permit or an occupancy to convert something from 1 unit to 2 or from 20 to 25, it was done illegally. So illegal uses have no grandfathering under Chapter 48. Once you illegally convert something, it will always be illegal until you do it legally.
And I guess would that be proper for a variance then, to seek to get that illegal made legally? Or I'm just a little lost on this particular case about how to proceed.
Yeah, and I can't really speak too intelligently about the zoning bylaws in 1979 or 1980 because I was 8 years old. But with today's zoning laws, if you were to try to convert this property from, let's say, what I have determined to be a 5-unit dwelling into a 7, you would do that through the planning board, through a special permit, not through this board. What you're deciding tonight is whether or not my decision was accurate or not. You're not deciding, is it are we going to make it a 6 or a 9? Yeah. You're deciding if I'm right or not.
Thank you.
It's Residence B, which allows 1s and 2s by right, I think, correct?
It does, and then there is a caveat within our zoning that provides for conversion of existing non-conforming uses, which this is, as a 5. It's an existing non-conforming use in Residence B. There is a section 700.1.3.1 which allows an owner to petition the planning board for a special permit to conversion to any residential use. So he does have that.
Recourse. Yep.
Yeah, recourse, right.
Okay. Any other questions for Nelson? Let me turn you on, though. Just give it a tap to see if you, just tap the microphone. Oh, okay, I got you in the wrong place. Try that one.
Okay. All right. So if paperwork were filed correctly, it would be a legal 7-unit, but because paperwork wasn't filed, it's 5.
Back in 1980.
Right. So we wouldn't be here today if that paperwork were filed unless you were seeking from 7 to 8. But it sounds like we couldn't do that anyway. We can't do 7 to 8, but we could determine whether 7 would be legal based on what history this has.
Are you asking if
We
we can make that determination tonight based on what happened in 1980?
What we're doing tonight is saying whether this is a legal 7 based on the history of approvals. We can't actually determine that it's 8, is what I'm understanding the building inspector is saying.
Right, and I don't think the question of 7 versus 8 is really what's before us.
It's whether it's 5 or 7.
5.
If you want me to answer that question for you.
Please.
Yes, if they had properly executed their variance in 1980, recorded it, and performed a laundry list of issues that had to be taken care of, Mr. Snow would have come in. When I did my legal use determination, I would have determined it to be a 7 dwelling unit structure. Now, if he was satisfied with that, he wouldn't be here. And if he wasn't satisfied, he could still appeal that, obviously. So, yes, if that was done properly, it would be a 7 unit, not a 5. It wasn't done properly, so it's a 5. And not to tell the board, you know, what your responsibility tonight is, but essentially the appeal is of my declaration of it as a 5, not, should we call it a 7 or an 8 or 9 or whatever.
Right.
Am I right or not?
And your determination was based on review of all paperwork, records, documents?
It was
in the
based
city?
off of, honestly, everything Mr. Snow said. I mean, he laid it out there
Right.
pretty accurately, and
You did not visit the property?
no.
Okay. And I want to ask Mr. Sullivan, because I certainly had concerns just about every unit, other than the basement one, didn't have conventional egresses. And did you happen to, any research on? Okay, yeah, because you didn't go out there, so you don't know.
I didn't go out there, and honestly, the way the building is currently configured has no bearing on the legal use of it, because you can convert any building in the city illegally, and that doesn't turn it into, you know, doesn't turn a chicken into a cow. It's always a chicken. So the egress issue, you know, exits and egress are designed for structures based off of what building code they're built at. So this building was built in 1939. The rules were a lot different than they are today. As long as you don't ever change that structure considerably or change the use of that structure, then its exits and its egresses are grandfathered, for lack of a better term. If they're considered to be dangerous, then a building official can go in and force someone to change them over. But typically that doesn't happen. If this building were converted in 1980 from a 5 to a 7, like the variance had been granted, I believe one of the conditions was the addition of exits, which is consistent with what would happen today.
It was specific to the third floor only.
Right.
Yeah. And I don't know what's there today, if that's what was put in. It's still
Yeah,
out a window and.
So the answer is that as a 5 dwelling unit building, its current, whatever egress it was constructed with is adequate. If it were to change, then whatever it's changing to, it would need adequate egress for that.
Okay. All right, any other questions? And we opened and closed the public. Would anyone choose to make a motion?
Can we open this for discussion?
Sure.
I'm curious whether other people's thoughts are, because I'm a little torn on this one.
As I said, if paperwork were filed, I wouldn't be here today, so that's sort of what's stuck in my mind right now, given that people haven't been in there for multiple decades. And I guess that's all I can say is that's kind of like in that gray area.
Yeah.
Adam?
I think my concern, though, is that we're really, I mean, I agree with Nelson. I think it's really just whether we agree, we agree with his call, and I don't see any real reason. The variance was not, it wasn't followed through with. And I guess I'm leaning more towards allowing the planning board to take a closer look. I mean, I believe Nelson had said that was another option for them. I just think as an administrative appeal, I don't know if it's proper for us to really overrule Nelson for this specific, that's just kind of how I'm thinking. I'm not sure if that's proper.
Well, I was leaning towards not approving it, but I certainly would like to give the gentleman the opportunity, if there's another avenue. You did ask if there was another option for possibly receiving approval. So I'd be very comfortable with the suggestion of referring it over to the planning board. That didn't come into play when you initially received the application because?
A legal use determination is a black and white thing. It doesn't take into account other options you might have, who lives in the house, who bought the house, who sold the house, how nice the guy is that owns it. Unfortunately, it's black and white. What's the legal paper trail for
Right, but help
this
me with
property?
why it was directed to this board and not to the planning board.
Because I made a decision that they want to appeal. So
Okay.
that goes to you.
Okay.
And Nelson, it would be a special permit that they would be seeking if they wanted,
It would.
okay.
Yep.
All right, on that basis too, so I'm going to vote to deny it on grounds that I think an administrative appeal is a black or white issue. I have a larger concern. I think that if we're allowing this, we're kind of getting outside the idea of an administrative appeal. I think it's more appropriate for a special permit. I think this gentleman has a very convincing argument, and I think it's just more appropriate for a special permit where they can consider these factors, where our decision is, like Nelson said, it's a black or white issue.
Okay, and not to hamper him pursuing that, the denial from this board will not prevent him from going to the planning board? No. I was hoping Mr. Miller might weigh in on that. I just, again, trying to give you an opportunity to pursue that.
It could. It could.
So we could
So
table.
I would say I would deny his application without prejudice for him to reapply for the planning board, because I think there is
Okay.
some ambiguity about his different avenues, and I don't want to prejudice him.
And I don't want to prevent him from not being able to go to the planning board based on, the option you're suggesting.
Just as a point, I think the proper way to do it would be to let him withdraw without prejudice, not to deny it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's when I hear denied, that was my concern.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Snow, I think, I know I can speak for two members here, and I'm not sure on the other two, but we'd like you to go to the planning board and see if you get the approval through them. Mr. Sherwin thought it would be more appropriate for them to issue a special permit, given, the number of units involved and what the zoning is down there. So if you agree to that, if you withdraw from us this evening without prejudice, it will enable you, we believe, to go to the planning board and have them hear you.
I think that's wonderful under the circumstances. I'm not sure, because I kind of hard of hearing here.
Yeah.
And I couldn't hear all the things that were going on.
Okay.
So I'm not particularly sure what the issue is that's creating the doubt. Could you maybe tell me?
My understanding, sir, and again, we're doing our best with this because this is kind of a tricky issue that's come before us. Our understanding is that the building commissioner, his decision is a black or white issue, and he's already determined that this should be a 5-unit property, and that we really don't have any discretion to change that based on the building commissioner's decision. A special permit, however, takes into account a lot of factors, and I think that it may encompass what you're looking for. It may consider some of your hardship. I don't know that for certain, but I just feel like this matter is more appropriate for a special permit than it is an administrative appeal.
All right, good. I think that's a fair compromise under the circumstances.
Right, and
You're not kicking me out of here.
Administratively, we didn't want to deny because we didn't want to prevent you from being able to go to the planning board. So the suggestion was if you withdrew your application from this board, that would put you in better stead in terms of proceeding with the planning board.
Well, I think I'm well advised to withdraw.
All right, so you're requesting to withdraw without prejudice?
Please,
Okay,
please.
thank you. And I appreciate everything you put together there. It took us a while to read it, all the information. And I saw that you took care of one of my former high school teachers, Mr. Carter.
Well, how about burying the kid?
Yeah, I read that. I read what took place.
How about over $20,000 in rental delinquencies?
Yeah, he was a good teacher. Thank you.
Did you know him?
I had him as a
He was a
student.
football coach over there, too.
Right, Bill Carter, yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
ladies and gentlemen, for your consideration. And I'm not sure what the procedure is going to be. Will we receive a letter to tell us to do something?
I think we have to vote on it, don't we?
Yeah.
So I so move that we allow this gentleman to withdraw his
Okay, a second?
nomination.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll send out something, and you might want to have a conversation with Mr. Miller and/or the planning board to see about proceeding with that avenue.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
All right.
Appreciate your help.
Thank you. Sorry for the delay here.
It's taking a big risk here, right? You getting 4, you have to bet 1,000. Thank you.
Pat?
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Patrick McDonald on behalf of the other two petitioners before the board this evening. I understand that the fifth member is not going to attend at this
Correct.
point. And respectfully, both petitioners would prefer to have the benefit of a full complement
Okay.
for the petition, so we are asking if we might be
Sure.
postponed to what I assume would be the next regularly scheduled meeting of the board.
Yep, I won't be in Aruba, so. Third Wednesday. Looks like the 16th,
That's fine.
January 16th. Everyone around? We may not have a 5th also, because I think we're at the point where we're looking to recruit someone, so I don't know if it will all play out by then. I'll try to get that going tomorrow.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
May I submit the tear sheets
Yes.
on the Marvin Street petition?
Sure. Hey, not to open that one, but that was a single-family house on 2 currently separate lots per assessors. Were you having, if you received the frontage request tonight from us, would you have to still be going to the planning board to merge those lots?
We would have to go to the planning board for that, as well as development in a floodplain.
Okay.
This is step 1 in the process.
And you need, this is the frontage
We need the frontage
to
variance.
the domino effect?
Petition the planning.
Yeah, okay. All righty, great.
And the plan is to combine the lots. It would be a single.
Yeah, because they're each 5,000 square feet, so you'd need it for the area. Okay. Thanks, Pat, sorry. Thank you. So I think, that's it, right? We had Linda that we just did, and Lebanon had 2 petitions, and Marvin. Mr. McDonald was handling those other 3. So did we get our vote in on Linden? We did, right? We got to withdraw? Yeah, okay, and now we need a vote to allow the postponing of the, without prejudice, the other 3.
I so move.
Okay, and that would be for the 2 petitions on Lebanon Street and the one on Marvin. Okay, all right, and Adam motion, and I think Bill said second, so all in favor. I think that's it, right? I'm not sure why everyone's still waiting for us. We're done. I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry. I wish you would let me know. So next month, let me know if you can't, okay? Is there any questions you had, though? Come up so we can hear you. Come here. Oh. All right. Meeting to motion or adjourn? Okay. Let me shut everything up.